Today it's all about Boxers. Now, I personally love Boxers. I think they're a fantastic car. Sort of sit strangely in the market. Everyone loves Daytonas and Dinos, and Boxers sort of sit in the middle. Now, in all the years I've been doing this since about 86, 85, 86, it's not often you get all three models of Boxer here. So they made three Boxers. You've got the 365 carburettor, the 512 carburettor, and the 512 injection. Now, we'll go through the numbers in a minute, but it's not often you get all three all together in one place. I've only ever known it a couple of times. So the planets have just aligned and we happen to have the whole set. Okay, we've got four Boxers here. So we've got a 512 carburettor, 365 carburettor, 512 injection, and another 512 carburettor. So we've got four, so we've got the whole set. So what I thought I'd do is go round and do the mastermind, the geeky, what's the difference between all these Boxers? The 365 was the first evolution of the Boxer. Came out 1973 through to 1976. Now, quite low on numbers. They only made 58, I think, right-hand drive ones, of which this is one, and 380 something in total. So quite a rare car. 4.4 litre, so 365 was 365 cc's per cylinder times 12, which is just under 4.4, is how they worked that out. So that was the first car they made. So in 1976, we went from the 365 to the 512. So 76 to about 81, I think these came out. Again, made a few more. They made 929, I think, on these, and about just over 100, 101 or something right-hand drive cars. So again, pretty rare. We've gone up from 4.4 to 5 litre. So the 512 is now 5 litre, 12 cylinder is how they numbered this one. And we're still on carburettors, so we're on triple downdraft carburettors here and still on triple downdraft carburettors in the 512. So now we're into 1981. So 1981 to about 1984. Obviously they wanted to break into different markets and there was no way big quad carburettor cars were going to pass any emissions. So I think it was mainly for the American market. This has got K-Jetronic on it, so it's got fuel injection. They made just over 1,000 of these, but in right-hand drive, only 39, so pretty rare. So all of these cars in right-hand drive are pretty rare things to own. Still the 5 litre engine, so 5 litre, 12 cylinder injection, hence the 512 Boxer BBI. There's certain things on these that make them instant recognisable. Generally, as original, the 365 had silver airbox tops and the 512 has black airbox tops. Is the easy way. Obviously, as we know, this is the slightly smaller CC engine, slightly higher revving. The other big difference is this is the wet sump engine. The oil's all contained within the sump, whereas on the later cars it's what's called dry sump and it's housed in a tank. And as always, the early ones are always the most powerful. So these are about 350 brake, 344 I think they are, with about 301 of torque. So the other major differences are these have a single plate clutch and these are cable operated clutches. So the clutch on this is cable operated, which makes it a little bit heavier than the later cars. These are known for having plenty of carbs. So they run 4 Weber 40 IF3C carburettors, which are the triple downdrafts. They were used mainly in these, some of the Porsches ran them. Now, these don't run a choke system, but the 512s do. They've got electronic solenoid, I'll show you in a minute. They all run the Morelli ignition system, which is a very early electronic ignition, which is a big silver box down there. Generally, they're known in the trade as the sort of whistling units. They whistle, but when you turn the ignition on, they whistle. And it's just the way they are, but it's quirky to Boxers. Here we're underneath the 512 carburettor. So basically the same engine layout. Now, there's various people that look at this. Some people call it the Boxer engine, which is obviously why these were called the Boxers, that it was a flat 12, the pistons are going flat towards each other. Some people call it a horizontal V. It's known as 180-degree V engines because it's that, but either way, the pistons are 180. It's a flat engine, generally known as the Boxer engine. So bore size went up slightly on these. We're at 82mm bores now. Dry sump lubrication, so there's a big tank at the front here that holds all the oil. These things hold about 13 litres of oil, so there's a lot of oil going around in these. We're up from 301 torques to about 335 or so on these, so we've gone up a lot on torque, and it does show when you drive these. These have got a lot more torque when you drive them. They're a lot easier to drive. Compression ratio has gone up to about 9.2 to 1, so we've sort of busied things up a lot. So slightly bigger capacity, more torque, but less revs, whereas these ones top out at sort of 7,000. We're about 1,000 cc. We're at 6.6 on these now, so they've come down a lot on the rev range because of the bigger size of the engine. Torque figure's gone up, which is a massive difference in drivability. The actual brake horsepower's gone down, so we've gone from 344, I think 350. We're down to about 340, so we've lost a little bit of horsepower and traded in for torque. So here we are under the injection engine. As you can see, basically the same engine, still 2 valves per cylinder. They're all 2 valves per cylinder, these ones. There's no quattro valves. But we've got completely different layout. We've lost all the carbs, so we've got twin metering units. So we've come into the 80s now, and Bosch developed this cage-electronic system, which was used a lot. I've spoken about this before, through the 80s. It was used through all the hot hatch stuff. It was the injection system for the 80s. So Golf GTIs, XR3Is, all the Ferrari range, 308s, Testarossas, all had this, but this was probably the first one it went into. So you've got twin metering heads. You've got one that side, one this side, and low pressure injectors going straight into the manifolds. Still at about 340 horsepower, so we didn't have a drop in horsepower. We're still at 82mm bore, so we haven't changed the bore. They've literally just put the injection on it. What it does do, it makes the car better in traffic. However, the carb cars are good, but if you get them on a really hot day, carb cars are carb cars. And obviously emission-wise, fuel injection is always better. So this did get them into different markets, mainly America, I think, where emissions were a bit more crucial. But you can see visually, the engine bay is completely different. No, we've got header tanks in different places. We've got completely different airbox systems. It's a completely different layout, even though it's fundamentally the same block. Still on dry sump engine on the 512i as well. So let's have a look at some of the cosmetics. Done a bit of engine sort of chat. Obviously, the big difference is, and people ask this, 365, as this was a continuation of the 3 individual rear lights, and the original cars, which this has got, is the 3 outlet exhaust. So 3 exhausts, 3 lights. This was carried on from sort of the V12 365s and things like that back in the 60s. They carried on these lights. So that's the main difference on the back of a 365. The other subtle differences you'll notice that 365 hoods have got less louvers in. They've only got 2 rows of louvers, whereas the later cars have got more louvers. So looking at the back, is the 512. So we've got these are the classic Ferrari lights. These lights were used, Boxers, I mean the list is on this, Boxers, 308s, 328s, F40s, 400s, 412s, got a Mastermind, shouldn't I really? What else had these lights in? Very much used all the way through the 70s and 80s as your standard Ferrari rear lights. Obviously we've gone to just normal Answer twin outlet exhausts, but you can see obviously to improve the cooling through the engine, we've got a lot more slats now. So not only have we got the 2 here, we've got some up the side and some up the middle on the 512s. And another quirky thing, the 512 has badge 512 BB, and the I has the I. 365 doesn't have a badge. There's no badge on the back of a 365. Again, we've got a standard Ferrari rear lights. This one's got body coloured rear bumper, which I think was standard on these. Obviously the same as the carburettor car, the Answer twin outlets, but in 1980-81 we had to have rear fog lights. So they modified the rear spoiler, so you have to have rear fog lights now. So that's one of the other rear differences. And when you look up on the top, again, with the venting, the plenum chambers and the airboxes are in a different place. So these big plenum covers on the top. On the carb cars, they're further out. On the injection cars, they're further in. So you've got a thinner band of vents, but they've still got as many vents as you can possibly get into them. Hugely iconic. The layout of the front of a Boxer, these great big orange indicators, gives the car real presence. Whenever you're out in one of these, you know, people look in the mirrors thinking, crikey, what's that behind? So, no, real iconic front. Pop-up headlights, great, really cool. And they're just something about pop-up lights, which is good. Generally, the early cars were two-tone. You had satin black on the bottom and body colour on the top. And most people went with that setup. Coming over to the 512, again, twin body colours. We've got fog lights tucked away down in the grille on both of these cars. Again, the big orange indicators, pretty much the same body-wise. Nice anodised grille on all the cars. These are all the same, so that's quite a nice feature in the front. Some people say, wasn't that body colour or satin black, but they're an original anodised feature. Now, on the injections, slightly different. On the other two cars, the side lights were incorporated up in the headlights for some reason, but they changed them on the eyes. So the eyes is distinguishable. You've got side lights in the front bumper on the eye. Still got the fog lights, still the rest of it, but the fog lights are exposed as opposed to being housed in the grille. So here we are inside the 365. Now, one of the main differences, not a lot of people know this, is this is the same as the early Daytonas. You don't get reclining seats. The seats are fixed in that position. And if your body's not that shape, well, that's tough. It's the way they look at it. So non-reclining seats, they are fixed. It just goes backwards and forwards. Something else that is different, as I mentioned earlier, the 365, we've got a red line of 7.7, sort of 7 to 7.7 on one of these. And on the other ones, it's lower. So that's one of the main difference. Smaller CC engine, higher revving. Other than that, pretty much the same. You get a small glove box, which you can hold, there's the fuse boards and bits and pieces. You get quite a lot of pocket space in these, quite distinctive pockets. The door handles on these are tucked up underneath. I've had people trying to get out of these. The handle's tucked up there, which is quite nice. These cars only do, I mean, if you get 12 to the gallon, you'll be doing very well in one of these. No, 4 triple downdrafts aren't known for their economy. So, and I've known people who have done tours in these cars. They say it's fantastic, great noise, brilliant thing, but God, we have to stop at every petrol station. Standard Ferrari H-gate, very distinctive of the Ferrari brand. Lovely gearbox once it's warmed up. Very basic switches. This one's got aircon, front lights, hazard lights, DR and D, left and right-handed fans. The heating systems aren't brilliant. It sort of blows some air inside. These cable-operated flaps that most of them, the cables have come off. They're quite hard to get working. You sort of fight design on these. It's a cable that goes down through the car and moves a little flap in a box, which wasn't the best idea. And the heater tap, you're trying to move a heater tap, which isn't the best design with a cable that's sort of doomed to failure anyway. But you did get electric windows. So you got electric windows back in the 70s. Luggage wise, you've got a bit of space behind the seats. But that's about it. It's probably one of the biggest drawbacks of the Boxer. There's not masses of luggage space. You've got all the engine in the back, so the back's out of bounds. So all you've got is the space that's in the front. But otherwise, quite a comfortable cabin. No, even though the seats don't recline, they're not uncomfortable. Under the front, as I've just mentioned, there is a bit of storage space. You've got a bit there. You can get holders and some cases, or you can buy yourself some nice Ferrari luggage, but it's nice in there. Underneath, you get the space saver spare wheel. Now, they've all got space savers. All three Boxers run space saver spare wheels, and the battery and everything's based under that. The other thing on these, I forgot to mention, these are all aluminium. So, aluminium front and rear clams over a steel framework. So they are known for a little bit of corrosion around the sides. And obviously, you just got to be careful when you're manhandling them, that they're quite soft. Another thing that was really nice about the Boxers, and they had these on Daytonas as well, is these little attaché cases with the tools in. So Ferrari are really good at this. We've spoken about the Shadoni luggage before. You've got a lovely little case, you can see, with the little catches on. This one's even got the original keys still with a little nylon tag, so it's never been used. And then you open them up, and you've got your little spanners all in here. And then underneath, you lift up that first layer, and you've got the second layer. Now, Ferrari do a very nice, beautiful toolkit. Someone's spent a bit of effort doing this. Now, because they're so collectible, you don't see many cars with them. They've all disappeared over the years. So it's really nice to see an original one with the car. So one of the things I always double, triple check on a Boxer is where the clam is shut. Whereas the front clam opens forwards, it's not going to happen. When you're travelling along, and if this lifts up, and the wind will get under it, and it will lift the whole lot over. And if you're doing 60, 70 mile an hour, that's going to take off like a sail. And no, they're irreplaceable now. You couldn't get hold of them. So the one big lifesaver, you've got 2 pins. So the key to shutting a Boxer bonnet is to almost drop it from about here. You know it's shut, and then you push this little centre lever down. That's the safety catch. And then when you're inside, if for any reason you've left that open and you can see that, it's a sort of safety. And then you just double check that they're well and truly locked down. Adjusting the clams and adjusting the pins is crucial. Whenever we've done major body work or restorations on these, it takes a long time to just get the pins right and the catches right. So these all lock down really nicely, but it's crucial. So here we are in the 512 carburettor. And as I've just mentioned on the 365, we've really come on leaps and bounds now. We've got reclining seats. So there's a little twisty knob here that you can have a little bit of adjustment. You've also got some headrests, and you can slide the seat forward in one go. And they had the introduction of these luggage straps to go on the parcel behind on the seats. And this carried on into pretty much the same design as the Testarossa, that you could put your luggage behind, and you can recline the seat to do it. So a few more creature comforts in this one. Dashboard pretty much the same. Clutch, as I said, you've got a hydraulic clutch on the 512, which is a little bit easier. It does give the thighs a little bit less of a workout. The other switch, which is different, is this one, which is the choke switch. As I mentioned on the carbs, the 512 carburettor's got a little electronic solenoids on the side of the carbs and an actuator to speed the idle up. Here we are on the injections. Subtle differences. We've still got our reclining seats, so we can still put our luggage in the back. Something else that happened on the 512s, but not the 365, you've got this little parcel shelf trough for more storage, whereas the 365, you'll notice, is just flat. Now, other subtle differences on the carburettor cars, you've got one little electric mirror, a little stick on just one side. On the eyes, you get twin electric mirrors, so you've now got some visibility. But 365, you didn't get any mirrors at all. The big difference on the eyes, and this car's got it now, I haven't seen this for a long time, is the original Ferrari stereo with the little Ferrari badges on. This car's totally original. Pioneer did it, and you can see this very sort of 70s and 80s stereo. But in addition to that, you've got a graphic equaliser, and again, it was Ferrari branded. You can see it around here. Now this is really 70s. No, graphic equaliser, you can push little sliders up and down. Really cool, but this car's still got it on. I've only ever seen these fitted on the BB Boxers. It's the only car I've ever seen it fitted to. The other thing they did, following on from my comment on whether the rear hood's shut or not, they gave you a little red light to tell you whether the hood was open. And you can see there's a little red light there. So they're obviously thinking you really don't want to drive off with your hood open. And you also got an oil pressure warning light. Up until then, you just got a gauge with pressure. You now get a warning light on the injection cars. To go with the stereo, obviously got factory fit speakers, very 1970s big speakers. Again, all the rage at the time. Slightly more modern layout of interior lights and roof lights. You got little coat hook things to hang jackets on, which you just didn't know. Ferrari didn't worry about that sort of stuff back in the 60s. So one of the other main differences that comes up on these is size of road wheels, and this is similar as they did on the Daytonas as well. The early Daytonas had 7s on the fronts, 7s on the rears, same as these, or 7.5 I think they are. So you had the same wheels front and rear on the 365. When you went to the 512s, basically you got a 7.5s on the front, but you got 9s on the rear. So you've got thin wheels on the front, slightly chunkier, fit out the wheel arch a bit more, and that's the same as Daytonas. A lot of people put the bigger wheels on the back of the Daytonas. Now, when we went to the injection cars, for some weird reason, we went to metric wheels. So these are all Imperial wheels. Suddenly, they're sort of 15-inch. Suddenly, we've gone to these, which are, I think they're 415. So they did this on, the Mondials had this, and some of the quattro valves, they had 360s on them, so they had metric size. Rather than have an imperial size hole in the middle, you got a metric size hole in the middle. They must have done a deal with Michelin at the time for these tyres. The trouble is now you can't get these tyres. Whereas the XWXs are far more common, and 15-inch XWXs you can get. These funny metric size wheels you can't get the tyres for very easily. So a lot of people are now putting the Imperial ones. This car's actually got two sets. It's got an Imperial set and a metric set. Now you can tell obviously the spokes are slightly different. If you look on the spokes of the Imperial wheels, they're slightly more rounded spokes. When you look at the metric wheels, they're very flat and machined. Sometimes these are polished. It's a much flatter spoke, slightly different design, which is the obvious way of seeing, obviously apart from the size, but you can tell aesthetically they're slightly different. So that's the story. And some Testarossas, they've got metric wheels on, and you can't get tyres for those either, so you have to change those over or get the closest ones you can. So this customer's got the ideal situation. He's got 2 sets of wheels, so if we can't get tyres for this, because these are all cracked and old, we will run it on the Imperial wheels and just keep these for posterity. On the 512 cars, so the injection and the carburettors all had these extra air flaps in the rear quarters just to get some air through to the rear brakes, which you don't get on the 365s. 365s are all smooth. Now, some people have cut them in. I've seen them cut in, but the original 365, as this one is an absolutely perfect example, didn't have the air gullies in the side. It's one of the things that really doesn't work on Boxers is these wipers. Because of the quite steep rake of the windscreen, anything over about 40, and these don't work. And again, they've tried really hard. The mechanism is the most complicated mechanism out. You've got twin wipers, a little one, a big one, extra arms and bits, but literally they just do not work. You're better with just some Rain-X product on the windscreen just to sort of clear the water. It's one of those quirky things. They've all got them on the Italian cars. And now we get to the good bit, going out in the cars. Now, obviously, as I said before, I've been out in these things for years, but it's still a privilege to get out in these cars. So this is the 512 carburettor one. Now, cockpit-wise, these are actually quite nice. You fit. I'm sort of 5'11", fit in these quite nicely. Dashes are nicely laid out and everything. Now, you've got all the switches and things you need. You haven't got more than you need in this. You've got indicators, wipers. This one's got air conditioning. As I've said before, you've got electronic choke only on the 512 carburettor ones. Pretty much the same sort of layout of switches as we've used all the way through Daytona's Dino's 308. It's very familiar. Left and right fans, direction of air. Very simple, keeps it all going. Okay, so let's fire it up. One of the things you notice on Boxers, they've got the it's called a whistling units. The electronic ignition, it makes a very loud whistly hummy noise. They only fitted them to these, I think 400s. Quite unique sound when you get in a Boxer. Again, always dip in the clutch to take the drag off the starter. Now this one runs particularly well. We've just done cam belts and everything on this one, but to get a Boxer to run like this from cold is quite unique. Even though this has got the hydraulic clutch, it's still fairly heavy. You know you're pushing it. And to get 4 carbs all set up properly, it is hard on one of these, so it just rolls along. So the secret to these, to protect the clutch, is to just let them roll along. We're foot off the clutch now, just rolling along on the engine. If you sleep the clutch on these, they will eat them. I've known garages before where you shunt these things around in storage and what have you, you can wear clutches out. There's a lot of engine and not a lot of clutch, so you just have to be nice and gentle with it. The visibility in these is good. You've got a lovely front screen. You can actually see, you get one door mirror on this. You can actually see what's going on. Lovely view down the bonnet, like a big Dino. You've got the rising of the... putting it onto the road. You've got the rise of the front wings down the bonnet. Beautiful view. You run on this sort of wave of torque. It's a fantastic place to be. In comparison, some of the sort of, maybe even the Daytonas, the 4 cams, you've got to sort of wind them up a bit. These 5 litre ones, they've got so much torque, you just squeeze them and you can just feel them going. The other thing you've got is obviously the music from 4 triple down draft carburettors, so there's a lot going on there that makes a great noise. And again, these sit there great. I love these cars. These are sort of, as I've said, sort of 160, 180 mile an hour cars. But you can just gently ease the throttle. I mean, the noise, it's what Ferrari's all about, isn't it? Just the experience of going out in these cars. And as I've said before, yes, they're fast, but they're not as fast as the new cars. You can actually sort of accelerate a bit and have a little bit of fun in these without going ridiculous on the speed limits, where the new ones are just so quick. It's now warming up, the gears are going in beautifully. You don't need power steering, it's coming through roundabouts really nicely. You come out of a roundabout. always think these cars are sort of like big Dinos. I mean, the Dinos are fantastic. This has just got a whole lot more grunt and power than the Dino, obviously with an engine that's twice the size, but it does make it a very nice place to be. People say cars you can't drive, they cough and bang. Well, I'm in second gear doing less than 20 mile an hour around a roundabout, and I can just squeeze it gently and we're off. There's nothing wrong with carburettor cars as long as they're set up right. It takes a long time to get them set up with the new fuels and what have you, but when you get them right, they produce enjoyment like this. It's fabulous. And yes, they don't like being sat on a hot day in traffic and what have you, but on the open road, I think the noise is just unbeatable. So there we have it. We're smiling. I think these are fabulous. The event, these are definitely a more torquey cars. I've gone through the numbers, but they're easier to drive because it's got plenty of torque. It's surprisingly easy. I think people look at these and think it's a great big car with loads of carburetors and all the rest of it, but actually, no, these are nicer to drive. When you compare them to other cars around, you've got Countachs and things like that. Getting out of a Countach after 10 minutes, you're like exhausted. Getting out of this, you could carry on. You could go all the way to Cornwall in this. You'd be absolutely fine. I've loved these cars from the 80s. I've done concourse with them. I'd love to do another one. They're fantastic cars. They're just great places to be in. There's a real presence. You get out smiling. And everyone asks about what's the difference between the cars. So hopefully I've gone through today and given you a bit of an idea of the evolution of the Boxer, how rare they are, the subtle differences between each model, and why you should have one.